back for another Drunk Friend podcast episode somehow. I'm Travis, and that's Alex. How's it going?
It's going. So far, so good. How about you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I was just telling you before this is my third podcast this week, and I have one tomorrow. I've almost converted to a full-time podcaster during this quarantine, and I'm not complaining.
Dang. You are staying busy. It's for dang sure.
Yeah. That and school on top of that. Yeah.
What's this new project you got coming up?
Yeah, I have a podcast, a fourth podcast. You can't have too many. I've always been told that. And I told my wife, I was like, I'll make you proud someday. I'll have my own Wikipedia page, whether I'm just in there on behalf of Twin Eagle or as myself for having so many podcasts. And
by
she
the
was
way,
like,
the Twin Eagle video posted today, folks. Go check it out.
That's right.
It solves the mystery of you are abortion.
I wish it solved it.
It kind of does and it kind of doesn't. In so many words.
But no, my wife said, I believe you. You know, if you want to be the most podcasting man ever, we'll be proud of you. We'll stand by you. So me and a buddy, we got together to do a podcast where we're basically going to read back through video game narratives and interject humor throughout. I don't know if it's a novel idea, but it was my idea at the time. And I'm excited to get it out there. So hopefully that'll be in a few weeks, and I'll be sure to plug it to death here so that everyone knows all about how to either listen to it or ignore it completely.
Well, I think that's going to work pretty well, especially as you get to like older games, like NES games that have truly ridiculous stories, like as you go through like the instruction manuals that try and rationalize whatever the heck is going on. I know Power Blade's got kind of a goofy story.
Yeah.
Games like Low G Man and stuff like that have like really strange kind of out there stories. Some of them are pretty generic that are just like thrown together cliches, but it sounds like a really good idea.
Cool. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. But yeah, so we do have a guest coming on a little bit later, but first a few housekeeping items, and I'll hit it first just by thanking everyone who's left a review for us so far. Once again, iTunes is sort of the one that pushes us along the furthest, but wherever you listen, however you can rate or review us, please do that. We'd really appreciate it. Again, it's not for our egos, although it does make us feel good. Really, it just tricks iTunes into getting more ears on the show, so we do appreciate that. And I also want to thank Pam of Cannot Be Tamed, obviously, for coming on last week. She was a hoot, and it seems like that was a very well-recieved show. People really enjoyed listening to Pam, so awesome.
Yeah, people like her a lot, and why not? And we've also been getting emails to drunkfriendpodcast@gmail.com. Just to let everybody know, we're still thinking of a YouTube channel for the show. What we would like to do eventually is make sure we get at least 10 or 12 episodes kind of in the bag. That way, we can upload them all at the same time, like in the same day, so people can binge all at once, or they can pick and choose what they want to listen to here and there. So we want to give people options, in other words.
Yeah, I think that's pretty smart.
So look for that in the future. Right on.
Yeah, and we do have some emails that came in, and I thought maybe we'd read a few here. We had one correction that we really needed.
Oh, man, this one's major.
Yeah, so I'll start it off here. Dear Drunk Friend, I'm writing this email to file a formal complaint regarding the most recent podcast. And then this was, of course, before Cannot Be Tamed. He says, in which 90s pro wrestling was discussed. While several wrestlers were discussed, including Doink the Clown, a true legend, Andre the Giant wasn't even mentioned. Not only was Andre the Giant an iconic figure in pro wrestling, he was also notorious in his ability to consume vast amounts of alcohol. Given that your podcast is titled Drunk Friend, this is the most egregious omission. Seriously, what the fuck? Sincerely, S.
I got no rebuttal to that. I really don't. It's a great point. There's the infamous picture of Andre holding a can of beer in his hand, and his hand envelops the can. That's how big his hands were. There's the infamous story of him drinking, I think it was like 114 beers in one night.
Yeah.
He could finish off like 2 bottles of vodka and barely be buzzed. Like the dude was just... I mean, granted, let's keep in mind, Andre, would have been the 70s and 80s. He was a very legit 7'4", 7'5", and weighed at least 500 pounds. And those aren't inflated pro wrestling stats like they do with a lot of guys. He was, when you see pictures of him next to other people, he was a freaking ginormous human being. I felt there's one picture, I think, when I think of Andre, there's one picture I see of him sitting in first class on a plane, and he's taking up both seats in first class. Like he has to sit by himself. It's like, that's how big that dude is. You can't help but feel bad for him, because like life must have been pretty tough for him. But he did manage to, kind of enjoy himself here and there with a shitload of beer.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And he was great in The Princess Bride, which you can't forget.
He was great in The Princess Bride. And I also want to point out that he was also, people, it's like, oh, he was a big guy. He was a circus freak. It's like, no, that guy was a legitimate performer in the ring. He knew how to get the most out of a crowd. He knew how to draw a reaction. The guy was an absolute mastermind when it came to the pro wrestling, craft. He was very, very good. Not just at oh, I'm a big guy, people are going to get a reaction out of that. He's like, no, he took it a step further, took it many steps further, and he was really, really good.
Yeah, hell of an athlete.
So good call, S.
Yeah, and I did reply to S, and I think I defended as well. I said, we would like to sincerely apologize for omitting the mention of the drunkest friend of all, Andre the Giant, but to defend ourselves, almost all of his meaningful wrestling career took place in the 80s, and this was a 90s pro wrestling show. So that was how I defended it. I still agree,
Excellent point.
Some acknowledgement on our behalf would have gone a long way. I get it, but hey, we got to defend ourselves here. We're just a podcast.
Well, I'm thinking of Andre in the 90s. He died in 94, I think. So he was part of WrestleMania 6, and that was basically his last real match when he teamed up with Haku to face Demolition at the Skydome at WrestleMania 6.
That would have been what, 90, 91?
1990.
Okay.
And then he made an appearance in 91 where he feuded with Bobby Heenan and Mr. Perfect. Then he had a brief little feud with Earthquake. And then he was just kind of, I don't think he was around much at all after that. But 90s Andre was not nearly as prolific as 80s Andre. So you bring up an excellent point. So shut up, S. No, I'm just kidding. We also want to give a shout out to Dennis, who actually knew who High Energy was.
There's literally dozens of us.
The team of Owen Hart and Coco Beware wearing those hammer pants. And then there's one other email we wanted to point out that cracked me up. It was a fellow named Ecw. Starts out right out, just like a bull out of the gate. You guys suck. You're boring and I hate you. Then he goes, nah, you guys rock. I actually use your podcast to relax and wind down after a long day of work. I love your wrestling episode. You both should do a collab together on wrestling games. That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, keep up the good work and I'll keep listening. Thanks, Axio. Anyway,
that sounds like an ultimatum. We have to keep up the good work?
Oh, jeez. God. I don't know. That's a lot of pressure. But I like the idea of a collab on wrestling games in particular. And that's pretty cool to hear from listeners like that. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
appreciate
thanks,
it very much.
We did ask for hate mail, so that's how he.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's a quality hate mail.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And I also want to point out one more thing here as we jump down the news bullets. In Blake Stoner news on Twitter, user at John Makoko, I think that's how you say that, John. Let me know if I got it wrong. He said. He'll basically let you know that you're not alone in the world, saying he played and enjoyed Blake Stone, and he ended the tweet with "Unite Blake Stoners," which made me very proud. So,
all right.
So you're not alone in the world. That must be comforting.
Yeah. Bear in mind, I have not played the second Blake Stone game. I've only played Aliens of Gold, but it is really entertaining, really fun, and Unite Blake Stoners. That's going to be I'm going to do a Blake Stone podcast for 90 minutes. I think it sounds like a good idea to me. It'll follow our 90s golf podcast. How about that?
Which is, the 90s wrestling podcast killed, so I'm sure the 90s golf one untouchable in terms
Fred
of the
Couples,
statistics.
Greg Norman, Davis Love III,
And that's
Steve Elkington.
And that's been our 90s golf podcast.
That concludes our 90s golf podcast.
I thought it was funny when I actually had to go looking for that tweet because I was like, I know I saw someone respond to him about Blake Stone. And so in the Twitter search, I searched SNES drunk Blake Stone and then realized that you had tweeted about it before, about a year ago. So you've been on a Blake Stone kick for your entire life. Yeah, someone asked, what's your favorite big box DOS PC game? And almost a year ago, May 26th, you said Blake Stone. So you've been on this for a long time. Yeah,
Blake Stone is kick-ass, for sure.
Dude. Oh, here's another one. In December 14th of 2017, someone asked again, and you said, I remember that one. I had a bunch of Apogee games from back then, like Blake Stone and Rise of the Triad. So you just haven't let it go, man.
Never. So coming up on this episode is Aaron from the YouTube channel Friday Night Arcade. He's got over 100 videos going back to October 2014. He's got a lot of in-depth reviews from all kinds of systems and consoles, covering everything from the very first baseball computer game ever made back in 1961 to covering much more popular NES games to more in-depth videos on stuff like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Hello, Aaron. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. How are you dealing right now through all of this? Hopefully everything's going well.
Hello, Min. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, we're just trying to stay sane, my wife and I, and, everybody's just doing the best they can. Frankly, we feel probably a little bit guilty because we're able to continue working through all of this, so, it's not really affected us too much, but, I'm having to do some extra stuff with my parents and stuff like that and getting groceries for my dad and stuff like that. So it's just kind of been a little bit more legwork, but we're doing okay and everybody's healthy and that's the best we can do. What about you guys?
Well, that sure sounds good. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm in the same boat as you, as where I'm lucky enough to be able to keep working from home. And I've got this channel nonsense to keep going and the podcast to keep going. Podcast now, we're on episode 7. If I was just telling Travis, it's like, this just started, right? Like, how are we already on, like, number 7 of these? Yeah, just walking the dogs, trying to stay sane, trying to, like, not go crazy on watching TV and, like, Netflix and Hulu and stuff like that. Like, I nearly watched, like, 3 hours of Seinfeld one night, and it's just like, I've seen all this before. Like, why am I watching this again? But it's just so dang funny. I just had to. So,
right on. Yeah, the same. I'm lucky to still have work and all that. Although I'll also say I'm lucky to still be able to complain about it because I don't like it any more than I used to. So I'll consider that, I guess, a blessing. But also, in Drunk Friend fashion, I was thinking about this the other day because I remember talking about it in one of the first few episodes with you, Alex, where I discovered that I could just get curbside pickup from the liquor store. And just today, I was like, man, I really need to restock. And then I did the math, and I was like, okay, we're on episode 7, so that's about 3 gallons per 7 weeks. And I was like, I'm moving through this kind of fast unless my wife's getting into it when I'm not paying attention. So maybe this could be a cry for help. I don't know, but... No, I'm doing all right, I think.
Right on.
There's been a bourbon shortage of the one type of bourbon that I typically pick up on here in town, and it's just the one kind. It's a very specific brand that I like, and I just have this vision of one other guy holed up in his bunker with like a giant pallet of toilet paper and all of the Buffalo Trace bourbon that he found in town, and I'm just like, I can't find this stuff.
Buffalo Trace. I don't think I've heard of that. What's that like?
It's just a nice, smooth Kentucky bourbon.
Right on.
Yeah, it's not too expensive, and
yeah. So I get into the Maker's Mark myself, and that's tough because that's 45%, and it's you feel it the next day for sure. Good God.
And you're on like quite. This is. Let's see. We did the intro. So you're about on your 3rd Arrogant Bastard Ale for this night. Is that right?
No, it's still number 2. I don't throw down beer that quickly. The whiskey goes down smooth, but the beer, I'm an amateur a bit.
Yeah, I can't drink beer the way I used to drink beer, and now it's a couple of them, and then it's sleepy time, or just you kind of feel full and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially after eating it's like, it sound good right now, a grilled cheese sandwich. How about I double down with that with the quesadilla? That adds up real quick. So, Aaron, where did gaming really start for you? Like, what was your first system? What kind of games were you into? How does that all go?
Sure. So games were in my house with an Atari when I was just a little kid. It wasn't even. I mean, I was so little that it wasn't even my Atari. It was just my parents' Atari, and we had an Atari 20, which I guess you'd call it the Atari 2600. For me, it was just the Atari. But
right, I think a lot of people called it that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was the Atari was kind of the first thing. Chopper Command, Space Invaders, all these just really simple games that are just easy to pick up and play. And for 4-year-old me, 5-year-old me, that was good enough, and I thought it was awesome. And then my grandparents got me a Nintendo when I was 7. I think it was Christmas when I was 7. And so then we had they had the NES and Mario Brothers, Mario 2, Metroid, that sort of thing. And then we actually had a computer in the house that my grandparents had got for us, and it was this. I mean, it wasn't really a computer meant for video games. I mean, it was the 80s. It was a computer that was more of like for business type stuff. I mean, it was totally overkill for anything we needed, but it was like a Tandy 1000 HX, I want to say, and it had some random like text adventure games on it, which I'm really excited about the episode that goes up this week, because that's it's all about this text adventure that I used to play on there. So
really,
yeah,
that's really cool.
Colossal Cave. I don't know if you ever. It was like the first one basically. It's just all text, plain text on screen.
It's those type of games that were written by like 1 or 2 people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, that was kind of a natural progression. I used to read those choose your own adventure books when I was a kid.
Oh, sure.
Where you just have the choice at the bottom of the screen. So then progressing from that to a text adventure, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, even though there's like no graphics or anything like that. I just thought it was really neat to kind of have that freedom in a game where you can just kind of go around and explore. And then, from there I went to Super Nintendo, which I bought with my own allowance money when I think I was 12 or something like that, 12 or 13. And
that's expensive.
Yeah, today's money, that's like $700? I don't even know.
It was yeah. And the funny thing about it was there was this very Super Nintendo sized box under the Christmas tree that year, and my mom kept reassuring me, no, it's not a Super Nintendo. And I'm like, maybe it is. And no, it wasn't. It was a coat. It wasn't not to sound ungrateful or anything, but it was just like, oh, man.
Well, you didn't start a YouTube channel about coats, so it makes sense.
There you go. So, yeah, and it wasn't even so much that I was like anti-Sega. It's just I think the NES came into the house first, so that's what we had. And I think I only knew one other person that had a Sega Genesis, so I didn't really get to play it that much. So I didn't have an opinion one way or the other about it, and it's kind of why I like doing the channel now, because it gives me a chance to play all the Sega games that I missed when I doing the show. And but yeah, then from there, I was always just Super NES and then Nintendo 64, and then probably took a break for a little while after that. I was kind of burned on the 64 just because there weren't any. I didn't feel like the library just had that overwhelming flood of really good games. There was like you had Super Mario 64 and then Pilot Wings and then nothing for like a really long time.
Yep.
And then
I'm with you on that. Yeah, for sure.
I had Turok and I had oh geez, I think I had like Mortal Kombat Trilogy or something like that.
ECW Wrestling Revolution or whatever that song.
Hey, say what you will, the wrestling games on Nintendo 64 were pretty good. WWF Attitude and stuff like that, but
the ECW game was not good.
that's not surprising.
Like No Mercy and WrestleMania 2000 were very good, but the ECW one was not. But I have two questions for you.
Sure.
Number one was, did your parents play the Atari?
They did.
When they had it.
They did. My parents and my uncle used to throw down on some Chopper Command, and we had some pretty epic battles, and it was a lot of fun. Just the family kind of passing it around and stuff like that.
Oh, that's really cool. And number two is, did the Atari just get tossed aside when you got the NES? Did you ever play it after that?
Well, tossed aside in the sense that it got stored in the closet, but it didn't. I actually still have it, the original Atari.
Oh, nice.
Cool. And it actually still works, even though my PS3 died 6 months ago. Yeah, I didn't really go back. Once the NES came into the house, I didn't really go back to the Atari at any point after that. It was
such a leap forward. It was
right.
Like sprites and scrolling screens, and it was crazy.
Well, and games that just lasted longer than 5 minutes. I mean, most of them, they were more than one screen. It's not to take anything away from them, but it just, Star Tropics is going to hold your attention for a lot longer than Space Invaders or something like that.
Yeah.
So you got all these games, and it seems like you had a pretty rich history of gaming. What really inspired you to start that YouTube channel? So, I mean, we're probably skipping about 20 years at this point, but was there any key inspiration? Was it gaming itself, or was it other YouTubers?
Well, it was kind of a combination of things. My experience with video production is kind of a weird one. If you've got time for a story,
go ahead.
I used to work at a planetarium at a local community college. And now when I say I worked at the planetarium, I mean literally it was just kind of a glorified clerical position. We took reservations from schools that were coming in on field trips and stuff like that. And the production designer had been trying to convince me to try out for one of the parts in one of the shows that they would produce in-house, doing like voiceover work. And I was really insecure about the whole thing. And she's like, I wouldn't be any good at that, and I just kind of poo-pooed it. And so finally one day she comes up to me and she hands me this book and she says, I need your help. I need to do some volume levels in the sound booth. I just need to get the microphone to the right level. So I just need you to open up this book and read from it. I said, well, okay. So they had this little. I mean, you've seen sound booths. I mean, this thing was just like a little tiny closet with a microphone in it, so I got cooped up in there and popped this thing open and just started reading from it. And then, of course, I just kind of started goofing off, and I was like reading from the copyright page and stuff like that. And then I was just and then I went into like full on Cubs broadcast announcer mode, Pat Hughes. It was just like, Chicago Cubs baseball is on the air. It's a beautiful day at Wrigley Field, and just being a complete goofball. And
so then good.
Yeah, that was good.
I get a knock on the door, and she says, we got what we need. And so I walk out, and everybody that worked there, the other student workers and the other staff, were all just kind of standing around the sound booth grinning at me, and they're like, you got the part. And I'm like, what? and so they're like, no, you got the part. We needed the voice of God narrator character, and that's you.
Wow. So you got the John Facenda compliment there. Wow.
So I ended up basically recording this part, and so that's kind of how I got my feet wet with the whole. Just recording a voiceover, recording lines of dialogue over and over again, with different inflection on different verbs and nouns and stuff like that. And then that kind of led to me taking a basic broadcast announcing class, which, I mean, my degree was in business, so I had no business in there other than I needed the elective. So that gave me kind of just more confidence, I guess, to kind of, I mean, it's scary, it's kind of weird, and But that class gave me kind of just enough to be dangerous with the whole thing. We learned some, we had an air shift with the local radio station and stuff like that. So, I produced some spots for the station and stuff like that. And real basic stuff. I mean, it wasn't too crazy, but so I had that experience kind of sitting in my back pocket. And then, fast forward a few years after that and, discovering other YouTube channels. I think we all went through the AVGN phase. At least I did. I don't know.
No, I did. I did too.
And it just, it's not to get too melodramatic, but we all kind of have those kind of down periods in our lives where maybe stuff's not going the way you want it or whatever, and you're just just maybe depressed or whatever. You got a job you hate or whatever. I don't know, but when I kind of stumbled onto those videos and just kind of binge watch, it brought me laughter at a time when I needed to laugh. And so, I always man, I'd like to do one of those once, just for the heck of it, So fast forward from there, and not really knowing much about video production. I mean, I could do some audio stuff, but that's when I'm like, well, if I make one video, I want to make a video about Space Quest 3. So that's the whole thing. Yeah, I know.
Tremendous.
Yep.
I love it.
I that first video, my God, first video probably took me at least 100 hours to make over the course of several months, just because
it's 25 minutes long.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing about that was I had no concept of script to screen time, like how many pages of script translates. So when I my first edit, when I just got the voiceover part edited down to kind of the spine of the video, it was 32 minutes. So I left a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor.
That's awesome.
But and then you'd have to kind of stop every few minutes and okay, there's a transition effect in my head. I know what I want this to look like, but you got to figure out what it looks like and find a tutorial on YouTube on YouTube, trying to figure out how to do this or that in Premiere and all that stuff, and stuff that's second nature now. But at the time, you're trying to, I don't even know what this is called, so you're trying to guess what it is, and then all that, while you're working a full-time day job. So most of the time it was, 11, 12 o'clock at night and stuff like that. But that's kind of how it came together, that first video. And and then the other part of it, that when I very first did that video, I only produced the first 2 minutes of it. And because I was still just kind of insecure about the whole thing. I'm like, this is kind of silly and weird. And so I produced the first 2 minutes of it, and then I sent it to 3 or 4 people that I really trust.
Your
and
proofers.
I was just okay. Yeah. And I was just okay, is this stupid? I actually sent it to, the lady that I used to work with at the planetarium that gave me my first part. I sent it to my best friend, and then I actually sent it to my wife, who was then my girlfriend. We hadn't been together that long. So that was kind of a that could have made or break the relationship, depending on what she thought of that.
Space Quest 3?
What? Yeah. I mean, she's always been supportive of the channel, but she's not really much of a gamer herself. So so that was dicey. But everybody was like, yeah, so where's the rest of the video? So that kind of encouraged me to keep going with it. So
that brings me to an interesting question, and I think it applies to me somewhat. Before you started your YouTube channel, or right there at the beginning, where you were like, is this stupid? Did you have some trepidation or something in you where you were like, people that know me wouldn't expect me to be a quote-unquote YouTuber, and that sort of held you back? It's like, what will people think, or what if people that know me find this? Was there any hesitation there with your personality and being on camera? Was there a disconnect there that you had to overcome?
A little bit. I think the people that know me know that I've always kind of been a little creative and maybe a little, I don't know if the word's weird, but just, would be capable of doing something like that. But then at the same time, I think part of it for me was just getting over that insecurity of like, does this suck? You know, and like, or is this stupid? Just, I mean, of course it is, but you know, just getting over that. I don't know what the word is. If it's, I don't want to say embarrassment, but just kind of an insecurity about it. But
well, sometimes it feels silly to like, why am I spending this much time on video games? You know,
right.
like it feels kind of dumb. I felt like that at the beginning, especially since I started out when I did it with a lot of RPGs, with the 2 Lufia games, with Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, Illusion of Gaia, all that stuff. And I was like, Jesus, this is a lot of time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this up. And, you know, you feel kind of silly. Like, what am I even doing? And all you need is that one little push from somebody that says like, hey, this is useful. And, or, hey, I enjoy this, or something like that. And it's like, oh, maybe I can spin this off into something and take it in other directions and stuff like that. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, just that little bit of encouragement to just kind of give you that itch to keep going.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's funny that you sort of went down that hole and told us that story about how you came to be, because I had this whole like paragraph of a question that I was going to build up to, and you sort of answered it, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway because I labored so long on this paragraph. I said that when I watch videos on your channel, it kind of makes me ashamed of my own channel. I say that kind of jokingly, but in some regard, I mean it, in that I feel like I should really just make clickbait videos that get people to watch NES reviews on your channel instead, because you put so much work into it. It looks so good. And I will say, you know, even that Sequest video, is it Sequest? No,
Space Quest?
Space Quest. What's Sequest? What am I thinking? What is this?
Sequest. Well, you got Jonathan Brandis on
I was
the mind.
thinking of Jonathan Brandis.
Roy Scheider?
I knew it did. To my credit, I knew immediately it didn't sound right. So anyway, that video, the production quality, even though it was your first one, it took you forever. You were uneasy about it. I mean, you knocked a lot of things out of the park. And sure, your stuff now is like a ton more refined, right? You've come a long way, but even then it was good. I was going to ask, though, prior to that, if you had any other types of YouTube channel or any other sort of test bed for your video development skills or anything like that prior. But now I know that you said you didn't. You just started there. So I guess my question is, did you have any other creative outlets before the YouTube channel that weren't really video making?
Sure. Well, a friend and I both had a blog that we kind of went in on at one point. And this was pretty lower end stuff, but it was fun for us. We did like a wrestling blog and stuff like that. I had a website of my own at one point that I ran, where I was just doing like movie reviews and stuff like that. In fact, like the first video, I used the little YouTube trim thing and edited it out. But when I first made the channel, it was actually going to be called Media Glitch. I don't know where the hell I came up with that dumb name, but it was going to be like video games and movie reviews and stuff like that before I finally settled on just doing games. But at one point, I was thinking about movie reviews and stuff like that, and I have the blog with my friend. We used to do podcasts where we like preview the pay-per-view. Every month, whichever big pay-per-view was coming up and stuff like that. And then,
oh, nice.
What era are we talking here?
Late 90s, but more so early, probably that early 2000s era.
Like post-merger?
Yeah, post-merger, like Chris Jericho and the Radicals showing up in WWE and stuff like that.
Brock was destroying the Hardy Boys, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. You were having, TLC matches with Edge and Christian every other week or every other
like
month.
On Raw and SmackDown. Yeah. It was ridiculous.
Exactly, yeah.
Crazy era for wrestling. But anyway, we were supposed to have Pam on for our part 2.
It didn't sound like she was that hip to that.
She resisted.
Sad. Brokenhearted about that. But so I got to know, how did you decide on the name Friday Night Arcade? How did that come about?
Well, it literally was just me and my friend Jay would usually just get drunk on Friday nights and play video games over on my couch. He lived a couple blocks away from me in this little podunk town here in the Midwest. And on Fridays, we'd get together, and we'd both get together, sit around, gripe about our job, and drink some sort of brown liquor and play old games. And in fact, a lot of the older videos, which I've now kind of moved over to the side channel, was just us sitting on the couch, basically. Yeah, I mean, it was basically Game Grumps. I mean, it was just two idiots sitting on the couch talking and playing games. But
Sure.
so that's kind of how that. What's better than going to the arcade on a Friday night?
That's completely organic. It makes sense.
Yeah, man. I enjoy that in that whole. I mean, I really miss hanging out on the couch playing games with my friends now. What a bad time to try to reminisce about something so awesome. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no kidding.
So how do you end up picking the games you decide to cover? And I kind of noticed, early on you were talking about your childhood, and it seemed like you started off with a lot of the games that you loved specifically when you were a kid. But nowadays, you've got several reviews behind you. How do you pick the ones you're going to do next?
Yeah, so definitely when I started out, I had kind of a hit list in my head. Mostly this was just an excuse for me to play some of my favorite games again. So that was a part of it. But
That's how I saw it too.
yeah, and then as I've kind of moved along, the way that I try to set aside a couple of hours every month where I can just kind of have a brainstorming session where it's like, okay, I can do some research, maybe. Google some top 20 lists or something like that. But then also, a lot of the ones that they end up being suggestions from viewers, and that's the stuff that I love. I'll get a notepad out and start scrolling through a bunch of my comments and what people have, and a lot of times I'll find out about a game that I didn't even know existed that way.
Right.
And it's like, they'll send me a link to a video and say, oh, you should check this game out. This would be really cool. And it's like, oh, yeah, that does look really cool. I got to check that out. So a lot of times.
Can I tell you?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Can I tell you about a game that somebody just recommended to me that I've never heard of before in my life, and it's for Sega Genesis.
Okay.
And it's called the Ooze.
Ooh. I think I've heard
And
of this.
it's developed by Sega Technical Institute, the same folks that did Comic Zone. And it was released in 95, which is 6 years into the Genesis lifespan. And you play as Ooze. It's like a top-down adventure game where you're just this pile of ooze slithering around the ground, like doing stuff. And I'm just like, where the hell did this game come from?
Yeah, I'm looking at the screenshots for this. This is
It's weird. It's like I just don't understand. Like how can there? I've been doing this since 2013. How can there possibly be more stuff that I haven't heard of? But commenters, readers, whatever, listeners, they keep coming through with like more stuff. It's like, hey, look at this. And I'm just like, what the hell is this game? And it's super fun to dive into and see like what happened and what is this game and all that sort of stuff. So I totally identify with what you're saying there.
Well, and then even it's like even the artwork on the box on this looks cool. That's the stuff that, you're like, wow, somebody put a lot of time into this. This is cool.
Yeah, it's pretty out there. Yeah, that's your mission, listeners. Google the Ooze Sega Genesis cover.
Yes,
Looks pretty horrific.
Make sure you put Sega Genesis in the Google search along with the Ooze. You don't want to take any chances.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to get the Ninja Turtles Part 2 movie by mistake.
You don't. And
God,
if
no
you got
love
the
for
third
Secret of
one.
the
Oh, actually, you know what? The second movie is actually pretty good.
It's okay.
The third one that's really bad.
Yeah, the third one's awful, but
Yeah. The second one's got Kevin Nash, doesn't it? With Super Shredder, I think.
Was it Kevin Nash?
I had no idea
he
about
plays-
that. That's just a fun fact I had no idea about.
That was the Super Shredder one underneath the docks where he gets
I hear us all typing right now
Contaminated.
to search this. I love it.
Yep. To the Google machine. Oh, that was him. I had no
saw
idea
it
that
in
was him.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters, and then that was kind of like a fun fact I learned like years later. Like, oh, by the way, that's Diesel. I was like, what?
Wow, that's incredible.
Like, okay.
All right. So, Aaron, you brought up your podunk town a couple times, and you and I were little town men. I can tell immediately we had a mutual respect for each other because we both kind of have that little town drawl. And, we're not from the big fancy Twin Cities or Southwest swanky Albuquerque like SNES Drunk. So, as a small town man, how
Swanky.
Oh, yeah, out there in Albuquerque. I mean, it even sounds swanky. How do you fathom that subscriber base? You're over 30,000 now. Has it ever been hard to wrap your head around that, the success in those numbers?
Oh God, I try not to think about it too much because I still remember when I just had like 60 subscribers and I thought that was awesome. So
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes we'll, my wife and I will be talking about that, and it's like, wow, that's enough people to fill up the stadium or whatever, here in town, and it's just that's kind of a crazy thought, but I try not to think about that type of stuff too much because, I mean, at any given point, I'm just happy it is where I was happy when it had a 50 subscribers or 100 subscribers. I was just happy that people were enjoying it, and like you mentioned earlier about making clickbait videos or whatever, I say phooey on that and don't worry about that because as I've done this, I've met a lot of other YouTubers that I met another guy that I probably had close to 5,000 and he had maybe like 150 when we first met, like just 150 subscribers, and then in that time he's up to like 50,000 subscribers now. I mean, he's lapped me and doubled me. So, just what I would say to anybody is don't worry about any of that stuff and just keep working on it and just keep making something that you enjoy making and have fun doing it. And hopefully you establish a relationship with your audience that you like. And that's the crazy thing too, is I've seen a lot of names over the last 3, 4, 5 years that I've been doing this that like, and maybe you kind of know with the SNES Drunk channel, maybe you've seen where you see like the same names over and you kind of recognize like, and then you're like, those people are still around and like, that just blows my mind. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm always so thankful for those. And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, sometimes it just takes that little spark or that little word of encouragement. I mean, I love the comments that people, when somebody shares a story of like, oh man, I remember playing this game with my grandpa or something like that. Or, I used to rent this game with my uncle. That's the stuff that gets me like, those are like my favorite comments. And I always, I don't have time to respond to everybody, but I try to respond to those because those are like my favorite. Yeah. I love scratching that itch for people and bringing that memory back.
It's fantastic. Yeah. I'm forever in debt to the folks at the Racket Boy forums. It's racketboy.com is a site that's been around for many, many years. And, it's a group of super intelligent, knowledgeable people. I don't know if it's possible to be cultured when it comes to video games, but these folks are as cultured as you can get.
Your comment section would suggest no, but but it is possible.
That's an excellent point. But they are fantastic. They were kind of the people that really got me going at first, and they were so nice, and they gave me really good feedback. And they were super, and a couple of those folks I still hear from every now and again, and it really makes you feel it. I'm pointing at my chest. You feel it right here when you
awesome.
when you see that.
That's awesome.
It is genuine. Yeah, it's really freaking cool. So
yeah.
So I wanted to mention on that. You mentioned the clickbait thing, but I wanted to mention the opposite. And one thing that you do, Aaron, that not many other channels do. Usually say it yourself at like the beginning of a video, like, hey, this video has no educational purpose, it's just for fun. And you do stuff like the Atari 2600 games set to 80s TV theme songs. And it features gameplay footage of Keystone Capers, and it's got shots interspersed of William Shatner. He's like running as fast as he can. It's like a middle-aged Shatner running as TJ Hooker. It's tremendous. I love that stuff. It's really entertaining. Do you have any other ideas like that you're working on, or can we expect more of that kind of stuff, or is that just sort of like a spur of the moment thing that you come up with, like, wouldn't it be fun if I did this, or how does that work?
Well, that particular one was totally organic. I mean, it actually came in on the Airwolf video like a week before.
That's right. Yeah.
I did a video about River Raid, and somebody chimed in like, "Yeah, I used to play River Raid with the Airwolf theme cranked up." And then,
great.
So then the next week I had to do a video about Airwolf, and then put River Raid to the Airwolf theme, even though it was a video about Airwolf on the NES. and that whole deal. But and then as I started, I'm like, oh yeah, I could think of all sorts of stuff. I could Keystone Capers, and then I'm like googling the intros for some of these shows and like seeing Shatner running. I'm like, oh, I got to do this. I don't care. The copyright overlords are gonna strike me. I don't even care. I don't even care. So.
It's worth it because seeing Shatner running that cop uniform is always gonna crack me up.
Huffing and puffing.
I was curious if you actually did get a copyright strike on that. I assume you did.
Well, I did the longer version that I did actually had Knight Rider set to it was Enduro on Atari set to the theme from Knight Rider.
Ooh.
And I posted that for Patreons, but that video got a copyright content ID, not a full blown strike. But so that video got a content ID, so I edited that part out, re-uploaded it, but then it ended up getting a content ID anyway on the A-Team theme. I was like, whatever, I didn't care. So
yeah,
like I thought I could get away with it, but oh well.
Man, I love Enduro. That would have been perfect too.
That's a great game.
Yeah, no, it scared me as a kid because if I remember correctly, it's the racing game where you race through different environments.
Correct.
And you go through the fog and you seriously cannot see anything in front of you.
No, like 6 feet.
Yeah, I remember watching my brother and sister play that, and I was like white-knuckled, like, oh my God, you can't be driving that fast. You can't be driving. You're going to run into somebody. And it's, yeah, I have a big connection with that game for sure.
But yeah, to answer your question, I've got a lot of ideas for videos. Nothing quite as wacky and zany as that stuff. Just kind of has to come to me.
Right.
But then when it does, it's like okay. I always carry like a little notepad around so that when I do get zany ideas like that.
One thing we've talked about with just about every guest so far is how silly it is to take something like retro gaming so seriously. Like, let me give you an example here of a comment I got today. And
I think I saw this one.
Oh, did you from Matthew?
Yes.
You're on a first name basis with this guy.
Oh yeah, good old Matthew. Yeah, he says you're flat out bad at games if you're remapping the dash button to the shoulder, and he's talking about Mega Man X. Learn to use different parts of your thumb at the same time. You are literally making the game controls less economic by remapping to a different part of the controller this way, forcing you to use more fingers for what one does faster. This is garbage advice. And then he goes on to say that in the 80s and 90s, Mega Man was considered baseline difficulty at worst. It doesn't even approach the true controller chuckers of its time. The stuff you all wouldn't touch because you're soft and weak.
My God.
And soft and weak are in caps. So do you get that kind of stuff? And what's your reaction to that? Like, what's your attitude towards like the real gamer types like that? Like that.
I think you might have mentioned it during your show with Pam, where there's like a certain threshold that you pass over, and then then they all kind of start coming in and they start kind of start coming out of the woodwork, and yeah, I get stuff like that all the time. I got roasted. I did a video about Atari 2600 games that like have endings that you can actually beat as opposed to just trying to rack up a high score or whatever. And one of the games that I mentioned was E.T. And I wasn't bashing on the game. I was just like, this game's kind of boring, and I just really don't feel like playing it to the end. Like that's all I said. I think I even got another one to this day. Like, oh, I can beat E.T. in under a minute. What are you doing? And it's just like. Well, good job, buddy.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like I get those types sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'll post these on Twitter or whatever, and it makes it sound like I'm complaining. I mean, like 99% of the comments I get are super nice, and everybody's just wow, this was a lot of fun or whatever. But some of these ones, and then there's ones I actually. I was hoping you'd bring this up. I had one that just popped in sometime here in the last day or two. That you get the one where it's like a run-on sentence, and I'm not even sure if this person is angry with me or happy or agreeing with me. And it says I say it's your. This is all one sentence, no periods or anything. I say it's your game, Genie. Your NES advantage in the codes in the pause button was already that's not cheating. That's like saying somebody that's stronger than you cannot lift as much weight as you because that is cheating, so that's cheating.
Is that a rap lyric?
So this was in response to my video about the NES Advantage, and I don't know if I think they're talking about the slow motion button because it like uses the pause button, but like I said, I don't know if this person's agreeing with me or if this person's upset with me. I don't know what I should do. Should I like this? Should I respond? Should I apologize? I don't know. So I just, so
basic form of communication has failed on every level. It's just like, what do I do with this? Like, this has fallen into my lap. There's nothing I can do but just stare at it and just be like, okay, and move on to the next one.
Yeah. So I try to, I don't have time, unfortunately, to respond to every single comment anymore. Yeah. I just don't. But, if it's somebody that's just kind of like with your guy Matthew there, I just kind of, I don't either. I wouldn't say anything, or I'd say cool, or I just like, or I'd be like, you might come back with like, are you sure? Or just something to like completely trip them up. Or now if it's somebody that's being like legitimately antagonistic to other viewers and stuff like that, then yeah, you're going in the rogues gallery. You're going on the shadow ban list or whatever. But
on the bulletin board, yeah. Oh, the shadow list, yeah. I know what you're talking about there. Yeah, you can.
Where they can continue to post, but only they see it. That's
only they see it, and they wonder. They keep posting for years, and they don't even think about why nobody's responding to them. They don't even. It doesn't even occur to them.
No,
they're just happy with posting. Yeah.
Is that something you unlock at a threshold? I don't even know about this.
No, you can. If you right click on a comment, you can just go here. Let me bring it up right now. If you, it's the ellipses on the comments next to the thumbs up, thumbs down heart, and you can go hide user from channel.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right.
And then they just, they can post however much they want. Nobody will ever see it. It's like a shadow ban.
Cool. It's a good pro tip for anyone out there getting harassed.
Yeah, exactly.
To answer the question, no, everyone's real sweet still to me, and I'm sure that's just me asking for it. But
you're
having a very nubile, fresh little channel that's not even over. I can't even annoy people with my community section yet, and they're in for it when I can. But
are you kidding? There are dozens of people on the edge of their seats just waiting for their chance. How dare you say that about Twin Eagle? What were you thinking?
Bring it. I'm prepared. I got Wikipedia on my side.
All right, we've finally at last reached the 90s NBA portion of the podcast.
Enough of that
talk
YouTube
some 90s
stuff.
NBA. Okay, Aaron, have you been watching the Last Dance documentary?
Yes.
Have you seen all 4 episodes so far? But this is going to air on Friday. Oh, actually, yeah, this coming Friday. So you've seen all 4 episodes then?
Correct, I have. Yep.
Okay. What do you think of it so far? What are your takeaways? What thoughts do you have?
And careful, don't spoil it. I've not seen it. I don't know if Jordan dies in the end or not. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, you never know with Rodman.
Just kidding. Go ahead. You can spoil it. I think I know what happens.
Well, it's interesting for me because I lived it. I grew up in Illinois, so I grew up watching these teams, and it's like discovering a whole other set of gospel texts that you didn't even know existed, because it's the same. A lot of it's been the same stories, and they're kind of introducing the characters and stuff for people that maybe didn't watch it. That you've got an episode that's about Michael, an episode about Scotty, the Rodman episode. Some of it was redundant, but at the same time, hearing it from their own words and hearing, their own stories, and like I was. I didn't understand at first how it was going to be, they made a big deal about, this is going to be unedited. There's going to be harsh language. And I'm like, well, how much harsh language could they need? But then you go back and you watch the episode this past week where they're talking about the rivalry with the Pistons. And it's it's very clear how much that hatred is still there between the Bulls and the Pistons some 30 years later. And I'm like, they made the right call to leave all the profanity in. That is awesome. That is just awesome. So no, I think it's just been fantastic. I think this is probably going to end up being one of the best things that that ESPN's ever done, and it's especially, you know, we're at a time right now where we're kind of starved for content and for sports anyway, and so yeah, I mean, I don't normally watch a show live when it airs. I'm usually the wait and, you know, DVR it or wait for it to be streaming somewhere. You know, catch up on it. You know, maybe at the end of the season, or you know, this I'm like watching every Sunday night. I'm like watching it live, and it's appointment viewing. So,
were you a Bulls fan growing up?
Yes. It's so, you know, I was like 9 or 10 when they won their first championship, so I wasn't old enough to really appreciate what I was seeing, but my family was real happy, and everybody was, you know, we was excited. We get to watch the finals every year, right around, you know, right around summertime and all that stuff. And then I didn't really become basketball conscious, I want to say, until like the third championship. That it was like it really sunk in on me what I was seeing.
The John Paxson shot.
That's right, the Paxson 3-pointer, and then Jordan retires after that. I still kept watching. Like they were good for the first year after he retired. I mean,
That's right, they were. Pippen was carrying them.
Mm-hmm. Pippen was carrying them, and they basically got screwed by a Hugh Hollins foul call in the conference semifinals. But they were fit. They only lost 2 more games than they lost the previous year when they won the third championship. They were 55 and 27. And that's when I started picking up like Super Nintendo. You know, I think I had NBA Showdown and stuff like that, and
nice
would play through. You know, I'd play through. Even though I was a Bulls fan, I would play through that with other teams sometimes and just try to win the title with them, just because there were so many fun teams. But yeah, and then when Jordan came back, I really tried to, like, at that point I was old enough to where I was like, okay, this is something we're never going to see this again. You know, with the greatest basketball player of all time, and this team and this unit, and you know, so I really tried to soak that up as much as I could before.
Man, you were a teenager living in Illinois. You had it all right there.
It was the perfect time.
Yeah, that's the perfect time right there. That's awesome. So my next question would have been favorite 90s players. Okay, then I'll have to amend this to like favorite 90s non-Bulls players that you might have.
Yeah, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Oh, nice. The Dream?
Yeah, it was just that, and those teams were fun to watch too.
They were.
And you know, I think we got started on this the other day when we were talking on Twitter about some of this, but like that matchup between the Knicks and the Rockets, with the O.J. Simpson NBA Finals.
OJ.
Game 5.
He played like shit that game.
Yeah.
That was a joke. He didn't play.
Yeah.
OJ, what happened? Your box score. Zeros across the board.
Yeah. But by God, they showed him for like 2 solid hours. Just tooling down the street. But
I'll never forget my dad just was in disbelief when that happened, and he was just laughing hysterically. He didn't know what else to do, I don't think. He was just laughing at the just absurdity of like, we need to interrupt the NBA Finals to watch this guy driving 40 miles an hour down the highway with like 25 cops following him. And my dad was just overcome with laughter at just the sheer spectacle of it all.
And it was every channel. So I was like, well,
you couldn't escape it. Yeah.
Why do you have to interrupt the finals? If somebody wants to watch this, they can flip over to CBS or whatever. I don't know why.
At one point they went split screen, and like it was just ridiculous. Like, either show the game or don't. Like, yeah, it was ridiculous. The 90s were a very strange time.
But yeah.
So Olajuwon, did you have anybody else besides that?
Well, I mean, even though the Bulls would always end up playing against the Jazz in the finals, I thought Stockton and Malone were just a really fun tandem. I like that whole NBA Jam lineup that you had with, you know, all the 2 players. You know, you had Larry Johnson and Alonzo Mourning on the Hornets.
Oh yeah, they were killer.
I think I won a title with them on NBA Showdown at one point or another.
Nice.
I mean, just they were. And one of the things that I like about NBA from the 90s as compared to modern NBA is that for the most part, these core players kind of stayed on the same team for the duration of their careers.
Yes.
So every year when the playoffs would roll around, you'd get these these matchups between like Reggie Miller and the Knicks, or Bulls versus Pistons or whoever.
Ewing was always on the Knicks, and even then it was Ewing, Oakley, Anthony Mason, John Starks, all those guys. And those Hornets teams they had Morning Johnson and Kendall Gill was a really good player.
And when players switched teams, it was a huge deal. I remember when Shaq left the Magic, I was like, can they do that? Can they just go to a different team? Like it just wasn't as common for a superstar to leave a team. So, the thing I agree.
When that happens, you always see the player that does that as a total jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why wouldn't you stay with the Magic? Like, you're an a-hole. Like, why would you? So, I remember thinking about that about Shaq for a long time. It's like, why wouldn't you stay with Orlando? But now I kind of get why he left, because Orlando didn't have much of a team. Penny was super banged up, and they really didn't have much else other than that.
And it's hard to make a big man look good in pinstripes, so it's another thing. Don't forget
they didn't change those uniforms for a while either.
No, they didn't. But that's the thing, though. I mean, I understand the business side of it. I mean, I'm not naive. I know players got to do what they got to do, but I don't really understand how you can even get invested in a team now. Because players switch teams so often. It's like every couple years they just kind of reshuffle the deck. I mean, unless you're just a generic basketball fan or you're really into fantasy basketball or whatever, I don't. Who's gonna root for? I don't know. Are the Grizzlies even a team anymore? We got all these expansion teams. I mean, but even as I could say this as a Bulls fan, I can't get invested in anything this team does right now. I mean,
what incentive do you have to root for the Bulls right now? You have Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
You've got is Luol Deng still there?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and no, unless you live in a city where most of the free agents want to go, what do you like? And if you're a Miami Heat fan, we had LeBron for a couple years and we made the finals. Now what? What do you do with that? I don't know.
Yeah, now it's okay. LeBron's on the Lakers and Kawhi's on the Clippers, and we're just kind of waiting around for Golden State to get healthy, and then the East has Giannis, and that's what everybody else is playing for third, fourth, fifth, basically.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like there was a shift to just pulling for players and not teams at some point. Probably.
I guess that's true. Yeah, it's the players are brands unto themselves.
Yeah, I
so
think
the teams almost don't matter.
And I feel like that was kind of a shift at some point, maybe around the turn of the millennium or whatever. I feel like I kind of felt that, and it kind of reflected in, and maybe this is a decent segue into the people I would collect when I collected, sports cards. It might have been born from that, even for me a little bit, in that I just sort of fixated on certain players, and even if they switched teams, that was okay because I still had this, they were still the same athlete or whatever.
Exactly.
Thankfully, my favorite player when I was growing up in the 90s was Reggie Miller. I liked the guys from Deep, and so he didn't go anywhere. So he was easy. He was always on the Pacers, and that was all nice and good. But some of the other guys, it would always kind of suck when they switched teams. But at the end of the day, I was from BFE. There was no sports team close to me to really have an allegiance to, so I just kind of followed the players anyway.
I was stuck with the crap-ass Timberwolves. What was I gonna do?
Freaking Kevin Garnett,
Felton's
15 years.
Oh, please. Garnett didn't show up till 95. What was I going to do before that? It was Felton Spencer and Luke Longley and Tony Campbell. These guys all suck. They won 15 games a year for 8 straight years or something like that.
Yeah, Pooh Richardson.
Christian Laettner? Are you on there?
Oh, no. Oh, God. Don't get me wrong, though. The Timberwolves, for a brief period, had one of the most exciting, fun teams for a 2-year stretch when they had Tom Gugliotta, Tommy Gunn. They had a very young Kevin Garnett, and they had Stephon Marbury. And they were their big three. They were super exciting to watch. They really worked well together, except when Marbury decided to play Hero Ball. But they had a playoff series, I want to say in 98 or 97, against the Seattle Supersonics. And this was the Sean Kemp, Gary Payton Sonics in the first round, back when it was best of 5.
Oh, yeah.
And the Timberwolves actually went up 2-1.
Oh.
And it really looked like, oh shit, they're gonna pull this off. And no, they got crushed the next 2 games. It was heartbreaking, but no, that team was a lot of fun. But other than that, it's been nothing but misery for the Timberwolves. But for basketball cards, for me, I was very much a prisoner of the moment when it came to basketball cards, because I would buy the Beckett baseball card catalogs.
Yeah.
And I would see who was worth a lot and who wasn't. And I saw Fleer Ultra cards were kind of going up in value. So I would get Fleer Ultra packs with my allowance. I remember getting Harold Miner, Baby Jordan,
Ooh.
Wow.
his rookie card, and I think it was 92 Ultra. And he had this seemingly iconic looking card of him shooting a fadeaway over Jordan, Bulls Jordan 23, not 45 Jordan, 23 Jordan. And he's shooting over him, and it's like, oh, that's him passing the torch right there. Yeah. Does anybody know who Harold Miner is anymore?
Oh,
Anybody?
I'm
No?
looking at that right now. Yeah, that's an epic shot.
Yeah, it's an awesome looking card. He's like shooting over him, and Jordan's like full extension trying to block it. And I was like, man, this is the coolest looking card ever. And it was worth like, I think $2.25, which is a fortune to a 10-year-old. But yeah, there was him. There was Richard Dumas was another one for the Phoenix Suns, was another like up and coming player. And I'm trying to think of who else. Yeah, Larry Johnson was a big one. Alonzo Mourning, Shaq, of course, was a big one. Shaq's cards were like off the charts. You know, those were like $15 if you wanted to get those. Nope, not happening. But yeah, basketball cards were the haves and have-nots. It was either you had like the Jordans and the Shaqs, or you had the Richard Dumases or the Harold Miners.
Yeah, I was definitely a second-tier collector. I sort of just assumed my position in society and was like, I'm not going to get any of the big boy cards. Let me just collect Damon Stoudamire and Jeff Hornacek.
Oh, Damon Stoudamire.
No one's going to want
You've mentioned
these.
him before.
Hey, say what you will about Damon Stoudamire. If either of those Raptors teams ever would have made the playoffs, the second three-peat bowls would have been screwed. Because they couldn't, like, nobody could guard Stoudamire. He would do that crossover or whatever, and like he would blow by Jordan every time. Like, I think if you go back and look in 96, 97, 98, the second three-peat, the Bulls had a losing record to those Raptors teams, and thank God they never got in the playoffs, or we would have been screwed.
Well, yeah. What are they going to bring Steve Kerr out there to guard him? Like, because Jordan's too big, Ron Harper's too big, Pippen's too big. Like, what are they going to do? Like, how are they going to?
Well, and that second, like Jordan, the announcers would always try to spruce it up a little bit and say, oh, look at him, he's conserving energy on defense. No, he's resting because he's 35 and he's old. He's saving a little gas in the tank so that he can knock down those fadeaways. But yeah, I guess it's interesting that you guys, I feel like I missed out on this whole basketball card thing. I would just buy like whatever NBA game was out on Super Nintendo that year. I never did get much into the basketball cards. It was like NBA Showdown.
So it was Showdown. And then Showdown for you was the big one, it sounds like.
Showdown, and then NBA Live 95 and Live 96, I think, were the two after that I had.
Were you playing full 82-game seasons on those?
I mean, I would simulate most of the season. Like, I'd play parts of it and just to kind of get a feel for the team, and then I'd play through the playoffs. But
of course, yeah.
And except if I was playing another team against the Bulls, I'd have a hard time convincing myself to play against the Bulls just because, like, I cannot self-dominate. You know, it just but it kind of would just depend on how it worked out. But one thing, and I don't know if you remember this or not, on the NBA Showdown game, I got to talking with a friend of mine about this the other day. You couldn't trade your bench players. So, like, if you wanted to try to mix and match your team, you could only trade starters for some weird reason. You were stuck with whatever bench that you had. So, like, if you were if you were playing the Bulls, you were stuck with like Trent Tucker and Stacey King coming off the bench, but they didn't. But then the NBA Showdown was the last one that actually had Michael Jordan in it before that whole
that's right.
that whole weird deal with his agreement or whatever. But then you could just make him in NBA Live 95 if you wanted, I guess. So it wasn't that big.
And 96 too,
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have a funny story about basketball games. I used to play, I can't remember which NBA Live it was, but I had it on the computer, and I liked it on the computer because I would create my own teams. I didn't, I think I played one stock season with the players that, was on the roster that the game came with. And then after that, I just went full creative mode and just made my own universe. I don't know who was in it. It just completely free fall. But the background of the game, like if you were ever in the menus or anything like that, the background shots where like the stats would be overlaid. In the background, there was always like a picture of just maybe a basketball player's leg or something. It was like a close-in shot of them doing maybe a crossover or some kind of dribble move, but it would just like it would zoom in so far it would just sort of show leg. And I remember my mom coming in and like being like, "Oh my God, what are you looking at?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And her vision wasn't great, but she immediately left the room and she was like, "I'm gonna get your father." And I was like, I turned around, looked at my computer, I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's still the basketball game." I didn't have anything up I shouldn't have. I had to turn around and confirm, though, because I was like pretty sure I didn't have porn up. And then she comes back with my dad. My dad was like, "Wait a minute." And he kind of realizes what's going on. I was like, "Dad, it's just a game." He's like, "Yeah, that's just a man's leg." And my mom was like, "Oh, sorry about that." It was just a whole awkward thing. And so after that, every time she came in my room, I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm just in here looking at men's legs, Mom. Don't worry about it." So... funny stuff. Yeah.
I wonder if I can get in touch with the dev team and see whose leg that actually was. If it was like one of the programmers. Or
I think it was NBA Live 98, and I think Tim Hardaway was on the cover, and I want to say he did a lot of the still shots for the game. It might have been his leg. That
would have been Miami Heat, Tim Hardaway.
Yeah, big hairless leg of Tim Hardaway all over, and my mom thinking that that was my thing. So.
I'm just looking at this picture now. Yeah, I think that probably was it. His leg is very prominently featured on that on that cover. So there you go.
But like all of the background shots for like the stats and everything, any halftime show would just like zoom in on a basketball player's body part for no reason, and it sometimes just land on that leg. Anyway, funny story.
It's pretty hot.
Yeah.
If I don't know. That's just. I think we're at a standstill here.
It's a slippery slope.
Indeed. All right. Do we have any listener questions? We probably should knock those out.
Yeah.
Or actually, I had one more question for Aaron, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Aaron, your message at the end of your videos is often and always in my terms, because I've watched like the last 50 of your videos recently to binge for this podcast because I do my homework. You always say at the end, "Don't text and drive," and I apologize if there is a solemn reason behind that, but is there a story behind that signature sign off?
I have been fortunate enough to where I've never been affected by that, but it's just it's just a big problem that I feel really strongly about. I know every time I drive anywhere here in town, I could be in the car for no more than 10 minutes and I'll see at least 5 people driving distracted, and it's just kind of something I feel really strongly about.
I'm with you.
So that's just kind of my angry old man yelling at the cloud thing, where I'm just like, stop texting and driving. I mean, I see people doing it all the time, and it's just people. We live very distracted lives, and people, like if you want to be addicted to your smartphone on the sidewalk or whatever, that's fine, I guess. If you want to go sit on a bench, but just try not to do it when we're sharing the road together. That's just
try not to do it when you're propelling a 2-ton vehicle, 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, forward. 47 feet per second or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just it, and I see people doing it all the time, and it bugs the heck out of me. So that's my little.
I appreciate you saying that. It's right on, man.
Yeah.
That's a very You're not an old man shouting at a cloud saying
Definitely
that.
not.
I think you're in the right.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that there was no personal context for that, but I do share that sentiment, and I hope everyone stops doing it.
We got some listener questions here. The first one is from Cartridge Club Portable. Trav, you know those people.
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curtis is great. He's hilarious.
If you could pick one SNES game, I guess he means any SNES game, for my girlfriend who loves Pokemon, what would it be? Assume she's never played any SNES game before. What's your pick?
Who loves Pokemon? That's the qualifier, huh?
I guess so, yeah.
Ooh, boy. This is gonna so I am like the most non-Pokemon person. Like I never played the games. I never had anything to do
I'm with you.
it.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not knocking people that are into it. I just never got into it. But now, does it say that she plays games was there a part of that where she plays games in general, or is this like for somebody who doesn't play games?
I will say, as an insider to knowing this guy a little bit, he does have a series on his YouTube channel where, which is actually called Girlfriend Versus, where he kind of shows his girlfriend a new game and she plays through it for the first time. So she has some experience playing games, but I don't think she's outright a gamer.
Okay. Well, I'd probably just pick something simple that doesn't require a whole lot of
Dexterity.
Dexterity, exactly. Yeah. So I'd probably just say Final Fantasy 3 because that's a solid one to play through.
There you go.
That's one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. So I'd go with that. Final answer.
Okay.
What do you got, Trev?
Hagane. I think really see what she's made of and see if they're really meant for
Contra
each other.
3.
Realistically, maybe Harvest Moon. I don't know. I was trying to think of something
That's a great pick.
kind of
There you
laid
go.
back, and a Pokemon is kind of wandering around with stuff. I feel like Harvest Moon's kind of that too, and that's me speaking ignorantly about both of those things. So they're just wandering around through trees, right? That's both of those games.
Harvest Moon's a good pick. I think I would go with Kirby Superstar just because it's co-op, and you said it was a co-op deal. So
yeah.
Kirby Superstar is a co-op deal, and it's pretty harmless. Lots of different game modes you can play through in that. I think there's 9 different ones. I forget off the top of my head, but yeah, different approaches, different things, and it's multiplayer. So that would be my pick.
Cool. You're the expert, so we have to default to you.
No.
Okay. Folks, what sound was that? The next question is drink a beer and play a game, which sounds like a good idea. What are your go-to quarantine beers and games? Also, has anxiety from the virus affected your YouTube motivation? Who wants to go?
Okay.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So the first question was quarantine beer?
Yeah, do you have a quarantine beer and game combination?
Beer and game combination. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I really don't drink beer too often, but when I do, there's this beer called Angry Bastard. It's I can't even really describe it. I'm so not a beer aficionado the way I probably should. Arrogant Bastard. That's what it's called, not Angry Bastard.
That's
So
exactly
a good one,
what
but-
Snestrunk's drinking right now.
Really? Well,
Are you kidding? You're drinking Arrogant Bastard? I just bought a 6-pack of that today.
that's if I do get it, that's what I usually have around if I do get
Right
one.
on.
Either that.
It's 7.2. That's pretty strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I'm going with bourbon in that
Right
case.
on.
So,
Yeah.
usually Buffalo Trace bourbon is my bourbon of choice. Maker's Mark is close second.
You two are made for each other, you know it? Why don't you do a
Man,
podcast
Maker's
with him?
Mark.
I'll just leave.
And
Maker's
then,
Mark is tough though, man.
lately, I've been playing. So, I know everybody assumes I probably just sit around playing really old games all the time and just all NES all the time or whatever. But I actually play. There's a modern game called DayZ. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a Walking Dead simulator, and it's just
Yes.
very kind of. It can be shooty, pew, but it can also be kind of just chill. So, like, it's just like the nature ambient sounds and everything, especially since we can't like really leave our house right now. I will just sit and drink like 2 glasses of bourbon and play DayZ for like 3 solid hours, and then I'm in my happy
Sweet.
place where it's just because you're kind of wandering around in the woods and it's just kind of this ambient nature sound. It's kind of relaxing. It's kind of, and then you run into somebody and get shot. But the 3 hours that you had up to that was an absolute blast. So that's
Right on. I think I'd have to go with Blake Stoney. No. I'm just kidding. Mine probably be Stardew Valley. Speaking of Harvest Moon.
Okay.
Stardew Valley is my kind of game because it's like a management game of it's very, very, very relaxed. It's very low stress. You just go around and collect stuff and do things and just meet people, talk to people, go have a beer at the bar. I can drink while I'm drinking in the game itself. So it's like works for me. So that would be my go-to. I've put over 200 hours into that game, so I haven't even touched it in over a year, I don't think, but still that's still my go-to.
I think for me, I just finished Yakuza 0, and there's plenty more Yakuza to go. There's Kiwami 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, what a better time to catch up on a great series than now. The pairing, I don't know if there's an exact pairing unless you just have some sake hanging out, but I've been crushing some scotch or some Jameson or whatever I have. Right now I'm sort of in a beer freeze because my wife gets all the groceries and she doesn't adhere to my specific beer wish list. She'd be like, they didn't have it, so I just got you. Does Michelob Lime sound okay? I got that.
No.
Something like that. I don't even know if that's a thing, but that's the kind of thing. So yeah, I've gone lighter on beer during these times and have crushed the liquor. But the second part of this question, since we've all answered the first part, was has the anxiety of what's going on of the virus affected your YouTube motivations at all?
No, not really.
Yeah,
Aaron?
That's it.
I mean, I've had some people chime in and say, "Hey, we really appreciate you keeping the channel going. It's given us something to watch or whatever," and that's been good.
Yeah, that's been super nice. Yeah.
Yeah, part of me was, I had the thought at the beginning, like, should I continue doing this? Should I say something at the beginning about washing your hands? I don't know. That's like every content outlet that I'm listening to right now has all these little PSAs baked in now, and I'm just like, But then
Seems like overkill.
Yeah, and so I decided to just not do any of that and just keep doing what I'm just hopefully when they come to Friday Night Arcade they can forget about it for 10 minutes and then go back to their normal life. And so
I think people appreciate that too. Yeah,
just try to keep it as sterile of a thing as possible. So
yeah, there's really nothing more annoying than like, we here at Lexus want to let you know that we're thinking of you,
Lexus,
and we want you to be thinking of us during this time and continue buying cars.
Yeah. And then the next commercial, we here at BMW want you to know that
it's ridiculous. For me, no, it hasn't really affected my motivation, and I get what you're saying too. I felt a little because I'm a little ahead of schedule, and I had a video that I made about the X-Men games that I made in very early March, maybe late February, probably early March. It was about the time that the term social distancing kind of upspiked, but it was a little bit before this was all as imminent of a threat. And I had put a thing in one of my videos where I was like, yeah, and if you're these characters, they're more melee combat, you want to get up close, but if you have one of these ranged characters, you'll be better off social distancing. And then as the weeks went by, I started to regret that line a little bit more. Not because I thought it was like offensive or anything, but I was like, are people going to hear that and be like, that's so tacky and, it's so played out. I left it in there because I was too lazy to take it out. But I just wanted to point out that I did have that thought where I was like, maybe it doesn't fit. But I think people just passed over it and were like, But yeah, it's kind of weird that you want to acknowledge it, but you don't want to acknowledge it because why do it? What's it going to do,
Well, and I think as long as you're, I think as long as you're doing it in good faith. I mean, some of these commercials, like you mentioned, the Lexus thing, they got the sad piano music, and they're like, oh, really? No, you just want me to go buy a car even though I'm out of work or whatever. And that's kind of crappy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Next time I'm looking for a car, I'm going to remember what Lexus said to me about the quarantine.
Yeah, and it's just, that's just very disingenuous. And so,
Yes.
I think as long as you're in good faith, I think it's fine. I mean, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay, we have one more question here from ArgCast, another retro gaming podcast. That's their name. I didn't just say that about them. That sounds disingenuous, but ArgCast. What are your favorite gaming podcasts? Or do you listen to any podcast?
Oh, goodness. So I listen to I really don't listen to any gaming podcast. This one maybe.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
I listen to God, my podcasts are very old man. I listen to like Planet Money and stuff like that. I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast if he has like a doctor or something interesting like that on there, where it's like a long form sit down interview with some doctor or scientist or something. I don't really care so much about the fight stuff, but if he's got some scientist on there or something like that, that's interesting to me. But and then I listen to what's that? God, I gotta look at my phone now. I think is it Bruce Pritchard that has one where he just talks about old wrestling stuff.
Oh yeah. You're talking about Brother Love.
Is that what it is? Yeah, something to wrestle with.
No,
Bruce,
I mean
Bruce.
that was his name back in the day.
Yeah,
When he was a character.
He's got a
Was
podcast
Bruce
called
Pritchard?
Something to Wrestle. That's it's interesting. It's just all old stories and stuff like that. So
That sounds fun. Does he have guests?
sometimes, yeah, he'll have other people, and they'll just like a whole podcast will just be centered around like one pay-per-view from 1997. It'll be like all the stories from that pay-per-view that goes into it, and
I think I would really like that.
yeah, he'll have guests on there too sometimes, or sometimes it's just him and one other dude telling stories, and it's always entertaining.
That sounds good.
Nice. For me, I guess my favorite one would be my own. I do the Polykill podcast, which is a podcast about a couple of old dudes trying to make their way through their backlogs, but life keeps getting in the way. Stupid life, getting in the way of video games. That's one I don't listen to myself. Oh, well, I do, but I'm not saying like that's the one that I listen to always. I used to listen to the IGN Game Scoop podcast, but I don't care so much about new games anymore as I used to, so I've kind of slacked off on that. So I mainly dig into true crime stuff, so most of my feed is just dark, grisly, macabre stuff. Last Podcast on the Left and My Favorite Murder and some of the more comedy-infused, scary storytelling kind of things. That's more my jam, yeah.
I just have Classic Gaming Podcast with Rob and Jay. They're really the only one I listen to. I do listen to the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN, and I listen to their podcast just because they make fun of sports radio and how seriously people take sports, and it's that always makes me laugh. But in terms of gaming and stuff like that, I just it's Classic Gaming Podcast with Rob and Jay. They've been doing it for probably since 2014, 2015. They've been at it for a long time, and they have their like little in jokes and stuff like that, and they're always really funny and informative and stuff like that. So I appreciate those guys.
Yeah, there's something about following a show for a while and getting to know them, and you sort of feel like one of them after a while. Yeah. Well, I guess that about wraps it up. All right, Aaron, thank you for coming onto the show and answering a few questions. Where can people find you online, and can you hint us toward maybe an upcoming project?
Sure. So if you just go to youtube.com/Friday Night Arcade, that's the channel, and then Twitter at FN Arcade, which I realized after I did that it kind of sounds like it just says FN Arcade. Just going to the FN Arcade. So I mentioned earlier about the text adventure thing, and that's actually the video that's going up Friday the 1st, which is that when this episode goes up as well?
Yep.
Yes, it does.
Cool. Oh, perfect. So So Friday's episode is going to be all about Colossal Cave text adventure.
Nice.
The challenge was to make a game with no graphics that's just 100% text on screen seem interesting for 9 minutes. So we'll see how that turned out. I actually tracked down a different version of DOSBox that had this like really kind of complex and cool looking CRT filter on it, so it looked like scan lines on it and stuff like that, just because I wanted to try to make it look as authentic as possible.
That's a good idea, though.
It's actually kind of an interesting story about the backstory for how this game came into being, and then it was programmed in Fortran for some big mainframe computer back in like 1977, and then it got port. There was like a million different ports of it that came out in the 80s, and it was just a fun game. It was have you ever heard the magic word XYZZY? Have you ever seen that in pop culture or wherever?
I think I only saw it referenced in one of your videos one time where you told me it was an important word.
No. Well, this is the game where it came from. So I'm excited about this one. It's this is one of those that was definitely on my hit list from the beginning, but I just never could figure out a way to do it in a way that would make sense. And it's so weird because you can slide in like a DOS game here and there. Some people are interested in those, some aren't, but this is just one I wanted to do, so hopefully people enjoy it.
I'm sure they will, man. So yeah, everyone, please check that out on Friday. If certainly you listen to this podcast, then jump right over to YouTube, check out Friday Night Arcade's fresh new vid on a text adventure. All right, that's been another Drunk Friend podcast. Be sure to check out polykill.com to find more podcasts like this one. And once again, you can reach out to us at drunkfriendpodcast@gmail.com.
If you'd simply like to help out the show, remember to rate and review us wherever you listen.
We're on Twitter as well. I'm at Trav Plays Games. Alex is, of course, at SNESDrunk. And as he said, you can find Aaron over at Effin Arcade. And, of course, at YouTube at youtube.com/Friday Night Arcade.
Also, we want to give our usual shout out to Coolor for the podcast music. The song you heard is called Electric Star Bounce, and you can find a link to more of his music on the Buzzsprout podcast page.
Be sure to catch us all on YouTube, and thanks for listening.
And we hope you have a good rest of your day.
Please don't text and drive.